Thanksgiving, or at least the American version of it, is unique in that it quite literally celebrates undocumented immigration. This is the image we're used to, the kindly, peaceful first Thanksgiving. Oh, so nice of them. They let the women and children and most of the Native Americans sit nearby, right? Then there's this, the cover of this week's New Yorker, depicting a more modern understanding of what we are celebrating on Thanksgiving Day. People crossing international borders by any means necessary, trying to make a better life for themselves and their families. We romanticize this practice in the past and criminalize it in the present. Alabama is showing how draconian immigration laws produced by Republican overreach just might be bad for the state's economic development. But in last night's Republican presidential debate, after taking some criticism for not wanting to deport every undocumented immigrant everywhere, Newt Gingrich, of all people, made it about family.
I do not believe that the people of the United States are going to take people who've been here a quarter century, who have children and grandchildren, who are members of the community, who may have done something 25 years ago, separate them from their families, and expel them. I do believe if you've been here recently and you have no ties to the U.S., we should deport you. I do believe we should control the border. I do believe we should have very severe penalties for employers. But I'd urge all of you to look at the Kriebel Foundation plan. I don't see how the party that says it's the party of the family is going to adopt an immigration policy which destroys families that have been here a quarter century. And I'm prepared to take the heat for saying, let's be humane in enforcing the law without giving them citizenship, but by finding a way to create legality so that they are not separated from their families.
Governor.
Now, compassion for undocumented immigrants coming from a Republican has traditionally hurt that Republican, even if he's already the president. George W. Bush took a lot of heat for proposing amnesty for millions, and Rick Perry's precipitous fall from the top of the polls began when he defended in-state tuition for undocumented students. On the other side of the aisle, President Obama's immigration policies have come under fire, including his administration's controversial Secure Communities program, which enables federal authorities access to local law enforcement databases. So would Newt's immigration policy be that much more humane, as he puts it? A clue lies in the Kriebel Foundation, the idea he was promoting.
The Kriebel Foundation has a very good red card program that says you get to be legal, but you don't get a path to citizenship. And so there's a way to ultimately end up with a country where there's no more illegality, but you haven't automatically given amnesty to anyone.
So this red card solution would reform immigration, all right. I mean, conservatives in Kriebel Foundation video for the program, like Matt Kibbe of FreedomWorks, tells us so. But the red card is literally that. It's a red card with a microchip embedded in it. Nothing nefarious there, of course. But what happens if that worker loses his job or misplaces her card and is stopped by an immigration agent? Where does the microchip go next? And where does she or he go next? Joining us now to talk about these issues of immigration is Rinku Sen, President and Executive Director of the Applied Research Center and the publisher of Colorlines.com. Rinku, I am so excited to have you here tonight.
Great to be here, Melissa. Thanks.
So I'm particularly excited to have you here tonight because you and I had an email communication, more than a month ago when you sent out the Colorlines report about immigration policy, and particularly this administration's immigration policy. And then I heard, Newt Gingrich talking about immigration policy on the GOP side last night. So I'm interested. Take us, from this level of how it hurts the economy. Tell me about families. What difference does this make to human beings living on the ground under these policies?
Well, Newt Gingrich understands that immigration enforcement has a lot of collateral consequences. And one of the worst collateral consequences is that families are split up. We came across a particularly egregious form of that kind of separation when we started to look at the intersection of child welfare departments and immigration enforcement. So what we found is that when a parent is caught up in detention or deportation and their kids are in child welfare, the parent is unable to carry out any of the tasks that the child welfare department wants you to do to get your kids back. And when that goes on for long enough, ultimately family courts decide to do what's called terminating parental rights, and they essentially say that family is not a family anymore, that parent is not the parent of those kids anymore. The kids stay in foster care or they are made eligible for adoption.
And what I remember from this report is that you were looking at people whose crime was parking tickets.
Right.
Very small sort of municipal level stuff, not the kinds of like criminal immigrant language that we hear. So what does that look like if you're someone who is in an abusive domestic relationship, or if you're a worker who's had their wages stolen? What do these sorts of policies mean for those individuals?
Well, they mean that you cannot have any recourse to protecting your own rights. So if you are abused by anybody, by an employer, by a neighbor, by the police, or by your husband, then you can't do anything about it. We came across the case of a woman who was being beaten up by her partner. The neighbors called the police. Police arrived, arrested both of them, the woman and the man, and kids went to child welfare. And instead of then getting out of county jail and getting her kids, the woman was sent to immigrant detention, from where she had no access to any of the things she needed to do to get her kids back. Right. So, and it's been more than a year. She hasn't seen them, and that is why so many law enforcement agencies resist programs like Secure Communities, because it prevents them from actually making the public safe.
So we're in a place where there doesn't seem to be any sane and reasonable immigration policy. I mean, Secure Communities is something that Color Lines has identified as a problem. Obviously, the Alabama immigration reform, the Arizona immigration reform, which reproduced some of these inequalities. So Newt Gingrich gives us last night red card as a possibility. Is this a possibility for some sort of sane and reasonable immigration reform that protects human rights and the borders at the same time?
Well, one thing that is true is that many people don't want to immigrate permanently. That's not in their plan. They'd like to be able to come work and then still call home home. And yet, we have a pretty terrible relationship to guest worker programs historically in this country. And the real question is, does that solution protect the worker as well as it protects the employer? That program is really designed to protect employers from being sanctioned and fined. And I mean, no one's ever gone to jail for hiring undocumented immigrants, but from that too. And but from my perspective, any migrant, any immigrant has to be able to own their own visa. They have to be able to move from employer to employer. They have to be able to fight abuse by their employer. If they need to organize in their workplace or form a union, they've got to be able to do that. And those kinds of rights are not guaranteed in this red card plan. They really don't have any interest in protecting the rights of the immigrant, really just in protecting employers.
So the one possibility, the one possible good news here is that maybe there will be a conversation about immigration reform that is more than just this ideological good guy, bad guy story. I mean, just maybe Gingrich, for whatever his other failings are, has opened up this conversation for us.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Newt Gingrich knows how to win an election, and he's clearly entered the general election at this point. President Obama, we were really, really happy to see that he actually responded to our report directly, acknowledged that it was a problem, that it was happening, and promised to put in place the administrative changes that would prevent it from happening. So we need to see action on that, because there are families being split up right this minute as we speak. Yep. And the more that the election includes those issues, the more hopeful I am that they'll actually get addressed.
Rinku Sen of the Applied Research Center and colorlines.com. Thanks for bringing a different focus on family to this Thanksgiving conversation.
Thanks so much, Melissa.
Thanks. The President of the United States today exonerated 2 turkeys. But the traditional Thanksgiving pardon is rife with bunk, which we will formally debunk at Debunction Junction. Stay tuned.